It's Levack and Goz on 104.5 The Team.
Game 7, baby. Two most beautiful words in baseball, in my opinion, and we are joined by our buddy Buster Olney as we break down last night's game and get ready for tonight. Buster live from Cleveland. Buster, we'll get into Game 7 in a second, but Game 6, what happened? What switch was flipped? Why were the Cubs able to actually go out there and put a bunch of runs on the board?
Well, I do think their hitters probably gained from their experience in facing Josh Tomlin the first time through in Game 3, because you could see, I mean, Chris Bryant was ready for Tomlin's curveball, for example. And, of course, that terrible defensive mistake by Tyler Naquin, their center fielder, and not chasing off Lonnie Chisnall, their right fielder, to catch that fly ball. And really felt like at that point, like it kind of opened the floodgates. And, you know, you understand why. After the Indians fell behind early, a lot of the strategy of Terry Francona, it seemed like, was to preserve the most valuable pieces in his bullpen, Andrew Miller, Cody Allen, Brian Shaw, rather than use them in a game in which it became very one-sided after Addison Russell hit that grand slam.
Buster, when Naquin dropped the ball or didn't get to it, all I thought of was Gary Sanchez, Rookie of the Year.
Well, it would have impact if only, but except for a couple things. One, the ballots were turned in right at the end of the season.
I know.
Oh, okay. I thought you were like thinking, okay, that could sway the ballot because Naquin looks so bad.
No, I just ran around my house swearing.
Going to win it anyway.
Yeah. Oh, you do? All right. I just ran around my house swearing, like, hopefully you guys got it right, and, you know, whatever.
Buster,
there you go. I understand.
Buster, any issues last night from your end of Joe Maddon deciding to pitch Aroldis Chapman?
Yeah, I don't understand it. You know, Joe came into the interview room, and to his great credit, and you know, a lot of times, guys, by the way, that, you know, in the postseason or in a Super Bowl or playoffs and something, you hear about the players being really inaccessible. If there's some sort of a media issue, the players have been great and the staffs have been great. And Madden, after that game last night, answered questions about the way that he handled Chapman. And you know, he said at one point that when he brought him in the seventh, he said you could lose the game there. Well, no, you couldn't. You actually were up. You had more latitude. I thought he would use some other guys and do what he could to save Chapman. You know, once he got a big lead, do what he could to save Chapman as much for Game 7. And then, you know, he acknowledged that he was sort of caught off guard when it became a 9-2 game in the top of the ninth inning. And he sent Chapman out to start the ninth inning, and he issued a walk. A couple of things come to mind. One, you know, I think it demonstrates that, you know, Joe doesn't have a lot of faith in a lot of guys down there. And that's a concern. But the other thing, too, and I wrote about this in a piece today about how, you know, this game is going to affect so many legacies, guys. I mean, this is a game filled with people whose the perception of their careers is going to be altered by what happens today. If at some point tonight, Aroldis Chapman gives up a hit that contributes to a Chicago loss, that choice last night by Madden, the way that he used him, is going to hang over him. And on the other hand, let's face it, if the Cubs win the World Series for the first time in 108 years, you might as well start constructing the, you know, the Hall of Fame speech for Joe.
Buster Olney with us right now, 104.5 The Team. Buster, do you give some leeway to Joe Maddon because knowing it's Game 7, knowing that when he goes to that bullpen, it's going to be, you know, John Lester, John Lackey waiting for him, he has a little bit more to work with than he had in the other games?
I have my doubts as to whether or not he would go to Lackey unless it were an extra inning situation because, you know, Lackey down the stretch was dealing with a shoulder issue, and he just doesn't have as crisp of a stuff as we've seen in past years. You know, maybe I'm wrong. And it's been interesting that everyone's sort of counting on John Lester in the way, for example, that we saw with Madison Bumgarner a couple years ago as an option of the bullpen. A bunch of scouts I talked to leading up to Game 6 were saying, you know what, you can't really use Lester unless it's an extra inning situation or, you know, Chapman's already been used because of his problem throwing the bases, right? If it's a 0-0 game or it's a one-run game, the Cubs are trying to protect the lead. Are you going to put him out there and basically invite the Indians to try to take a base against him when he can't throw to first?
Buster, you touched on legacies a little bit, and also the game tonight itself. Levack and I have discussed this, that Game 7s in the World Series, the last 25 years, my excitement level is high as if any of those games we've seen because of the passionate fan bases. For you, going into this game with all the hype surrounding it, is this the most exciting Game 7 you can remember covering in your career?
I think that, 2001, when the Yankees played the Diamondbacks, that was a hugely exciting World Series game because of everything that had preceded it, from President Bush throwing out the first pitch before Game 3 and the Yankees comebacks in Game 4 and 5. And keep in mind, at that time, the Yankees had this string of World Series championships that had dated back to 1998, and, everything that had gone on after 9/11, that was a highly anticipated game. But this one is, people are so excited about it for different reasons. And, a little while ago, I was texting with a member of the Chicago Cubs organization, and I said, it really stinks. Somebody's got to lose.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it stinks because both these teams have great people. The fan bases, both of them have been starved for success. And no matter what happens tonight, there's going to be one team that's, going to have conquered this long streak of failing to win a World Series, and the other team is going to have their guts ripped out. And it's going to be awful.
Right. Well, yeah, because Buster, I can't recall a time when there's no bad guy. It's not that they're boring; they're just both really likable teams.
Well, and they really are. I've covered every one of the Indians' postseason games. They're great guys, and the Cubs are great people. And how are you going to root against David Ross? How are you going to root against Anthony Rizzo, Addison Russell? Seeing him emerge in this postseason has been so cool. Kyle Hendricks is a great guy. And on the flip side with the Indians people, it really is, as you say, a World Series without villains, which is why it's going to be so hard, to walk into one of those clubhouses tonight after one of the teams loses.
Buster Olney with us right now, 104.5 The Team. Buster, we know you're super busy, so we appreciate the time. When you look at tonight's matchup, Hendricks versus Kluber, who do you give the advantage to?
Well, it's actually, to me, it's pretty close. Kyle Hendricks won the ERA title in the National League. But keep in mind, and we've talked extensively about his great stuff, but keep in mind that the Cubs have been very careful to make sure that he starts most of his games in Wrigley Field because the wind blow has, generally speaking, will blow in. And that really, he pitches to that. In road games this year, he's allowed 11 of the 15 homers he's given up. So he's much more susceptible to damage when he's on the road. And let me tell you something, guys. It's really warm here today. The ball's probably going to be flying like it did last night. That's going to make him more vulnerable. And on the other hand, you have Corey Kluber, who pitched, making his second start in 3 days rest. If he wins today's game, he's the first starting pitcher to have won 3 games in a World Series since Mickey Lolich in 1968.
So all right. So he's the MVP if the Indians win. Who's the MVP if the Cubbies win?
I think that's still to be determined. Brian, got a huge hit in Game 5, and he got that big home run last night. And if he does something tonight, I could see him definitely being at the forefront. There are a lot of different guys. I'd say this too, guys. You were talking about the various matchups. I think going into the game, because of what we talked about with the Cubs bullpen, on paper, the Indians have a huge advantage when it comes to the bullpen because Andrew Miller hasn't pitched in 3 days, and Cody Allen hasn't pitched in a couple days, and Brian Shaw hasn't pitched in a couple days, and so they're going to be following Corey Kluber, and I think that what you'll see is second time through the order, you will see Terry Francona look for any signs of cracks, weariness in Corey Kluber, and if he sees them, then he goes for Andrew Miller. We've seen him go 2+ innings in this postseason. Wouldn't surprise me if he went 3 or 4.
So you're thinking possibly 4th, 5th inning, if Kluber maybe has a bases-loaded situation in one of those innings, tie game, they go to Miller that quickly if needed.
I think you might see him in the 2nd or 3rd inning if a problem arises.
That would be amazing. Buster Olney with us, 145 The Team. Buster, who do you think actually takes it down tonight?
Well, before I mean, back in January, I think I told you guys, I sent out a tweet picking the Cubs to win the World Series because I wanted a seat on the bandwagon, which you knew was going to fill up. The beginning of the World Series, I picked the Cubs in 7. But I will tell you that I do think because of the way the bullpen situations have played out tonight, on paper, I think the Indians have the advantage. The question is, early in the game, can they slow down the momentum of the Chicago hitters? Because those guys are feeling their oats right now. They're feeling good. And so the question is, can Corey Kluber shut those guys down in innings 1 through 3? To me, if it's close after 3 innings, if the Indians have a lead or it's tied, I think at that point, heavy pendulum swing over to the Indians.
Buster, I know you're like me. You can't wait for tonight to get over so we can just pay attention to the Arizona Fall League.
Oh, stop it!
Practice.
Buster, thank goodness, Buster.
I've been doing a daily update, Buster, just to drive Goz nuts.
Oh, it's been terrible, Buster.
I know. Well, we just ran one on our podcast today, and of course we finished with the Allen Iverson line.
Talking about practice.
Exactly.
But it's the only news I've got as a Yankee fan, with the exception of looking at my exes as they close out a World Series game. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, actually, we were in Eduardo Perez. We were on the bus getting ready for SportsCenter today, and he goes, "Oh my God, those guys that the Yankees got in the trade, they better be good." Because the two guys who they were traded for are basically going to decide the World Series tonight.
It's so true. Buster, this is a bittersweet moment for me because this means unless something major breaks, I don't get to talk to you until we get back to baseball next year.
Well, as always, it's fun and great talking with you guys.
Well,
Take
Buster,
care, Buster.
We love you. Have a great coverage this evening and enjoy some downtime. God knows you've earned it.
Thanks, guys.
Buster,
I'll see ya.
Buster, have a great one.